The massive ships hung in space like sleeping giants. Commander Li Huan stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching thousands of human vessels prepare to leave. Each ship carried families, equipment, and entire communities from the outer colonies. They were leaving everything behind. "Final transport from New Terra is docking now, sir," reported Captain Kim Day over the communication system. His voice was calm, but Li Huan could hear the sadness underneath. Kim Day had lived on New Terra for 15 years. Now he was helping evacuate every human from the planet. Li Huan nodded, even though Kim Day could not see him. The bridge was quiet, except for the soft beeping of computers and the hum of the ship's engines. Through the large windows, he could see the blue and green planet below. New Terra had been humanity's proudest achievement. They had turned a dead rock into a world full of life. Now they were giving it away without firing a single shot. "Sir, we have confirmation from all evacuation fleets," said his communications officer. "All human colonies in the Outer Rim are empty. Everyone is aboard the ships." "Good," Li Huan said quietly. He touched a button on his command chair. "Dr. Park Mira, please report to the bridge." Dr. Park Mira arrived within minutes. She was a small woman with tired eyes, but she moved with purpose. Her hands were stained with chemicals from her laboratory work. She had been working day and night for weeks, preparing something she called the final phase. "How is the project?" Li Huan asked her. "Complete," Dr. Park Mira said. "All systems are in place. The biological matrices are stable and will activate according to schedule. The atmospheric dispersal units are hidden and functioning." Li Huan did not fully understand her work, but he trusted her completely. Dr. Park Mira was the smartest person he had ever met. She had spent years developing something that would change everything. She called it Project Genesis, though she never explained exactly what it would do. Far below their ships, alien forces were already moving toward the abandoned human settlements. The Vorthak Empire led the coalition forces. They were a warrior, species that had conquered dozens of worlds. Their general, Veltar, had given humanity a simple choice: become slaves or be destroyed. The humans had chosen a third option: to leave. General Veltar watched the human ships from his own command vessel. He was a large creature with thick armor and sharp teeth. His species believed that strength was everything. To him, the human retreat proved they were weak and cowardly. "Look at them run," Veltar said to his officers. "They claim to be advanced, but they flee like scared animals. This proves that humans have no warrior spirit." His intelligence officer, Quindara, was not so sure. She was from a different species, one that valued thinking over fighting. Something about this retreat bothered her. "General, why would they leave so easily? They built these worlds over many years. They had strong defenses." "Because they are weak," Veltar replied. "They talk about peace and cooperation because they cannot fight. Now we will take their worlds and show them how real warriors live." Quindara said nothing more, but she continued to watch the human ships with interest. In all her years of intelligence work, she had never seen a species give up so completely. Most would fight to the death to protect their homes. The humans had packed everything they could carry and left without even trying to negotiate. Back on the human flagship, Admiral Chobin joined Li Huan on the bridge. Admiral Chobin was an old man who had fought in many wars. He had scars on his face and hands from battles long ago, but now he looked peaceful, almost happy. "The last ships are ready to jump to hyperspace," Admiral Chobin said. "All evacuation. Fleets report successful completion of their missions." "Any casualties?" Li Huan asked. "None. Every human is accounted for. We even managed to save most of the livestock and many of the plants." Li Huan was impressed. Moving millions of people and all their belongings was an enormous task. They had been planning this evacuation for months, but it still seemed impossible that they had done it so smoothly. "Sir," Dr. Park Mira said quietly, I should mention that not everything was evacuated. Li Huan looked at her with concern. What do you mean? The agricultural systems remain active. The processing plants, the atmospheric processors, the biological research stations, they are all still functioning. They will continue to operate for years. Will the aliens be able to use them? Dr. Park Mira smiled, but it was not a happy smile. Oh yes, they will use them. They will use them very much. The systems are designed to be helpful and easy to operate. The aliens will find them very beneficial. Li Huan did not ask more questions. He had learned that Dr. Park Mira's work was often too complex for him to understand. He trusted that whatever she had prepared would help humanity in the long run. Admiral Cho Bin walked to the communication console. He opened a channel that would reach every ship in the coalition fleet. When he spoke, his voice was calm and dignified. To the Yaoige forces of the Galactic Coalition, he began. We, the humans, hereby withdraw from all disputed territories. We leave these worlds to you freely and without condition. We hope you will find them as hospitable as we did. May they serve your people well for generations to come. He paused, looking out at the planet below. We go now to seek new homes among the stars. We wish you peace and prosperity on the worlds we have built. The transmission ended. Admiral Cho Bin turned back to Li Huan. That should confuse them for a while. On the Coalition command ship, General Veltar laughed loudly. Did you hear that? They wish us prosperity. These humans are even weaker than... I thought. They are practically giving us gifts. Quindara recorded everything in her intelligence reports. She noted how easily the humans had abandoned their worlds, how polite their final message had been, and how they seemed almost eager to leave. None of it made sense to her, but she wrote down every detail. Begin the landing operations, Veltar ordered. I want our forces on every human world within the week. Send teams to examine their facilities and equipment. If the humans were foolish enough to leave valuable technology behind, we will claim it all. Li Huan watched the first coalition. Ships descend toward New Terra. Soon, alien soldiers would be walking through the cities that humans had built. They would live in human homes, eat human food, and breathe the air that human machines had made. Jump coordinates are locked in, sir, reported his navigation officer. All ships report ready for hyperspace, added the communications officer. Li Huan took one last look at the world below. Execute jump. Take us home. The stars stretched into lines of light as the human fleet disappeared into hyperspace. Behind them, they left empty cities, functioning machines, and growing plants. The aliens thought they had won the easiest victory in galactic history. They had no idea that the war had not even begun. 6 months had passed since the humans left. General Veltar stood on the balcony of what used to be the human governor's mansion on New Terra. Now it was his palace, the center of his new empire. The morning air was fresh and clean, filled with the scent of flowering plants. Everything seemed perfect. The humans built well, he said to his aide. These cities are better than anything on our homeworlds. The water is clean, the air is pure, and the food grows easily. They were fools to give this up. Below him, thousands of Vorthak soldiers and colonists moved through the streets. They had taken over every human building and facility. The transition had been surprisingly smooth. All the human machines still worked perfectly. The power plants generated electricity. The water systems provided clean drinking water, and the atmospheric processors kept the air breathable. Botanist Kex Ano hurried through the streets toward the agricultural center. He was responsible for all food production on New Terra, and something was bothering him. For weeks, he had noticed strange changes in the crops and plants that the humans had left behind. At first, everything had grown normally. The human plants produced good food, and the Vorthak colonists were well fed. But recently, some of the crops had started dying. Not from disease or insects, but as if they were simply choosing to stop growing. "Report," Veltar demanded when Kexano arrived at the palace. "Sir, we have some unusual developments in the agricultural sectors," Kexano said carefully. He did not want to anger the general with bad news. "Some of the human crops are failing, but new plants are appearing to replace them." "New plants? What kind of new plants?" "We are not sure, sir. They appear to be mutations or perhaps hybrid species. They grow very quickly and seem to adapt to our presence. Our scientists are studying them, but they behave unlike any plants we have seen before." Veltar waved his hand dismissively. "As long as there is enough food, I do not care what plants grow. The humans probably engineered unstable crops. We will improve on their weak designs." Meanwhile, Engineer Mordith was having his own problems with human technology. He had been put in charge of maintaining all the infrastructure that the humans had left behind. The machines worked perfectly, but they were changing in ways that made no sense. The atmospheric processors were supposed to maintain specific gas mixtures in the air. Instead, they seemed to be slowly adjusting the atmosphere to new specifications. When Mordith tried to reset them to original settings, they would gradually drift back to the new parameters. The water treatment facilities were doing something similar. They still cleaned the water, but they were adding trace chemicals that had not been there before. Mordith had tested the water many times, and it was completely safe to drink. In fact, it seemed to be even healthier than before. "The human machines are adapting," he reported to his supervisors. "They continue to function, but they are modifying their own programming. I have never seen technology that can evolve like this." His supervisors were not concerned. As long as the machines worked and kept the colonists alive, they did not care about minor technical details. On the other side of the galaxy, Dr. Jin Wu had once worked in a secret laboratory deep underground, on Earth. That was 3 years ago, before the evacuation. He and his team had been developing what they called evolutionary agriculture, farming systems that could change and adapt over time. The key, Dr. Jin Wu had explained to his assistant back then, is to create biological systems that respond to environmental pressures. Instead of static crops that grow the same way every time, we need plants that can learn and evolve. His assistant had been confused. "But sir, how can plants learn?" "They cannot learn the way animals do," Dr. Jin Wu had said, "but they can be designed to change their genetic structure in response to specific triggers, chemical signals in the soil, changes in atmospheric composition. Even the presence of different species can cause them to activate new genetic sequences." The work had been incredibly complex. They had spent years developing crops that carried dozens of dormant genetic programs. Under normal conditions, the plants would grow normally and produce food. But when certain conditions were met, they would begin to change. "What kind of changes?" his assistant had asked. Dr. Jin Wu had smiled mysteriously. "Changes that will help create a better world for everyone." Back on New Terra, those changes were beginning to happen. Kexano noticed that the air itself seemed different. There were tiny particles floating in the atmosphere that had not been there when the humans left. They were too small to see without special equipment, but they were everywhere. He collected samples and brought them to the Coalition science team. The particles appeared to be some kind of biological material, but they did not behave like any known organism. They were not alive in the traditional sense, but they were definitely active. "They seemed to be designed to interact with respiratory systems," reported the chief scientist. "When breathed in, they attach to lung tissue and release small amounts of chemicals into the bloodstream." "Are they dangerous?" Kexano asked. "No, not at all. In fact, they appear to be beneficial. The chemicals they release seem to improve brain function and enhance cognitive abilities. Several of our researchers report feeling more alert and focused. Since we began studying them, Quindara, the intelligence officer, had been experiencing these effects herself. Over the past few weeks, she had noticed that her thinking seemed clearer and faster. Complex problems that used to take her hours to solve now seemed simple. She was beginning to understand scientific concepts that had once been beyond her training. First, she thought she was just getting better at her job through practice. But when she talked to other coalition members, she discovered that many of them were experiencing similar improvements in their mental abilities. "I can suddenly understand advanced mathematics," one engineer told her. "Yesterday I solved a problem that our best scientists had been working on for months." "I find myself thinking about cooperation and peace more than conquest," admitted a Vorthak soldier. "It feels strange, but also right." Quindara began to suspect that something important was happening, but she could not figure out what it was. She decided to investigate the human facilities more carefully. In the abandoned human research centers, she found laboratories full of sophisticated equipment. Most of it was still running, conducting experiments automatically. The computers were filled with research data about something called Project Genesis. The files were encrypted, but Quindara was determined to understand them. She worked day and night, using her enhanced mental abilities to crack the human codes. Slowly, pieces of the puzzle began to come together. The humans had not just been growing food on their colonies. They had been conducting a massive biological experiment. Every plant, every machine, every system they had built was part of a larger plan to transform the environment in subtle but profound ways. General Veltar remained unaware of these developments. He was too busy enjoying his new empire and planning military campaigns against other species. He had no interest in technical reports about changing plants or atmospheric particles. "The humans were weak," he declared to his officers. "They ran away because they knew they could not fight us. Now we have their worlds, and soon we will have their technology. The coalition grows stronger every day." But Quindara was beginning to understand that the humans had not run away at all. They had simply moved to the next phase of a plan that was far more sophisticated than anyone had imagined. The particles in the air continued to spread, carried by the wind to every corner of the planet. The plants continued to evolve, releasing new chemicals and adapting to their alien inhabitants. The machines continued to adjust their programming, optimizing conditions for changes that were yet to come. The coalition thought they had won a great victory. They had no idea that they were becoming part of an experiment that would change everything they thought they knew about war, peace, and what it meant to be intelligent beings in the galaxy. 1 year had passed since the humans left their worlds. Quindara sat in her office, staring at data that should have been impossible. Her mind felt different now, sharper and clearer than it had ever been. She could understand complex equations. That had once seemed like magic. More importantly, she was beginning to understand what the humans had really done. The changes were happening everywhere. Every coalition member who had spent time on the former human worlds was experiencing the same mental improvements. They could think faster, solve problems better, and see connections between ideas that had never been obvious before. But there was something else changing, too. The desire to fight and conquer was fading. Quindara found herself questioning why. The coalition needed to expand its territory through war. For the first time in her life, she wondered if there might be better ways to achieve their goals. She was not alone in these thoughts. Across all the occupied human worlds, coalition soldiers and colonists were laying down their weapons and picking up tools and books instead. They were more interested in building and learning than in destroying and taking. Dr. Tolvan, the coalition's lead scientist, had been studying the changes for months. He was one of the most affected individuals, his intelligence having increased dramatically since he began breathing the modified atmosphere of New Terra. "The biological agents in the air are remarkable," he explained to a group of increasingly concerned coalition leaders via video transmission. "They appear to be designed nano-organisms that attach to brain tissue and slowly modify neural pathways." The coalition leaders on the home worlds who had not been exposed to the changes listened with growing alarm. "Are our people being poisoned?" demanded Admiral Zexkoth, the Coalition's supreme military commander. No, sir, Dr. Tolvan replied. Quite the opposite. The modifications enhance cognitive function, improve memory, and increase empathy. The affected individuals show higher intelligence scores across all measures. They are healthier, more creative, and more cooperative than before. Cooperative? Admiral Zexkoth's voice was sharp with suspicion. You mean they are being controlled? Not controlled, sir. Changed. The modifications seem to reduce aggressive impulses while enhancing the ability to solve problems through cooperation rather than conflict. On his flagship in space above New Terra, Captain Namjoon listened to this conversation through hidden monitoring equipment. He was a human deep space scout, one of many who had remained behind to observe the results of Project Genesis. His ship was cloaked and undetectable, allowing him to watch the transformation of the Coalition forces. He smiled as he recorded Dr. Tolvan's report. Everything was proceeding exactly as Dr. Park Mira had predicted. The biological agents were working perfectly, gradually transforming the alien colonists into more intelligent and peaceful beings. Control, this is Scout 7, he transmitted on an encrypted channel that reached the hidden human fleet. Phase 2 is proceeding as planned. The subjects are showing expected cognitive enhancement and reduced aggression. Estimate full transformation in another 6 months. The response came back immediately from Admiral Chobin himself. Excellent work, Captain Namjoon. Continue monitoring. Do not intervene unless absolutely necessary. Down on New Terra, General Veltar was struggling to maintain his authority. Many of his soldiers no longer wanted to follow military orders. They questioned why they needed to prepare for more wars when they could be building schools and research centers instead. This is unacceptable, he roared at his officers during a morning briefing. My soldiers are refusing direct orders. They claim they have found better ways to serve the Coalition. What does that even mean? One of his enhanced officers, a Vorthak named Gextar, who had once been his most loyal subordinate, spoke up calmly. Sir, perhaps we should consider whether constant warfare is truly the best path for our people. The resources we spend on weapons could be used to improve the lives of our citizens. Veltar stared at his officer in shock. Gextar had never questioned orders before. He had been a perfect warrior, brutal and efficient. Now he spoke of improving lives instead of taking them. You have been compromised, Veltar declared. All of you have been infected by whatever the humans left behind. I am calling for immediate evacuation and medical treatment. But when he tried to order the evacuation, most of his forces refused to leave. The enhanced coalition members had grown to love their new worlds. They had built communities based on cooperation and shared knowledge. The idea of returning to a society based on military hierarchy and constant conflict seemed primitive, and wasteful Quindara had finally broken through the encryption on the human research files. What she found there changed everything she thought she knew about the war and humanity's retreat. The humans had never intended to fight a traditional war. They had spent decades developing Project Genesis, a biological transformation system designed to enhance intelligence while reducing aggression in any species that encountered it. The agricultural systems, the atmospheric processors, and even the buildings themselves had been designed to slowly release these enhancement agents. The files revealed that humans had tested the system on themselves first. Every human who had lived on the colony worlds had been exposed to early versions of the enhancement agents. It explained why humans seemed to prefer cooperation over conquest, why they had chosen to retreat rather than fight. But the version left behind for the Coalition was far more advanced. The humans had learned how to accelerate the transformation process and make it more effective across different alien biologies. They planned this from the beginning, Quindara whispered to herself as she read through the data. The retreat, the abandoned worlds, even our victory. It was all part of their strategy. She realized that she should have been angry about being manipulated, but she found that she could not feel anger anymore. Instead, she felt grateful. The enhancement had given her abilities she never could have imagined. She could think more clearly, understand complex concepts, and see solutions to problems that had once seemed impossible. More importantly, she no longer felt the constant need to compete and dominate that had driven her species for thousands of years. She wanted to learn, to build, to create something beautiful and useful, rather than to destroy and take. Dr. Tolvan made another discovery that excited the Enhanced Coalition members. The biological agents were not just changing individual minds, they were enabling a form of collective intelligence. Enhanced individuals could share thoughts and ideas more easily, working together to solve problems that would have been impossible for any single person to handle. "We are becoming something new," he reported to Quindara. "Not just smarter individuals, but a cooperative network of minds that can think together. The potential for scientific advancement is unlimited." Back in Coalition space, Admiral Zexkoth was receiving increasingly disturbing reports. Entire fleets stationed near the former human worlds were refusing orders. Enhanced Coalition members were abandoning their military posts to join research projects and construction efforts. "They are no longer loyal to the Coalition," he told his war council. "Whatever the humans did to them, it has made them into traitors. We must act quickly before this infection spreads to our home worlds." The war council agreed. Plans were made for a massive military strike against all former human territories. They would sterilize the worlds completely, destroying the biological agents and any Coalition members who had been compromised. But they had no idea that their compromised soldiers and scientists were no longer the same beings who had conquered those worlds a year ago. The Enhanced Coalition members had been busy with projects of their own, developing technologies that the unenhanced minds could not even imagine. Captain Nam Jun watched the military preparations through his surveillance equipment. He sent another encrypted message to the human fleet. "Coalition forces are preparing a sterilization attack. The enhanced subjects may need assistance soon." The response was immediate. "Understood. Phase 3 is authorized. All scout ships prepare for reveal." The transformation was nearly complete, but the real test was about to begin. The old Coalition wanted to destroy what their own people had become. The enhanced beings wanted to protect their new way of life. And somewhere in the darkness between the stars, humanity was preparing to show the galaxy that the war had never been about territory or resources. It had always been about evolution. 18 months had passed since the humans disappeared. Grand Marshal Zekthor stood on the bridge of his massive warship, looking down at New Terra through the viewing screen. Behind him, the largest Coalition fleet ever assembled waited for his orders. 3,000 ships filled with weapons designed to destroy planets. "Begin the attack," he commanded. "Burn everything. Leave nothing alive." But when his weapons officer pressed the firing controls, nothing happened. The massive plasma cannons that could melt cities remained silent. The missile tubes that held planet-killing bombs stayed closed. Every weapon on every ship in the fleet had simply stopped working. "Sir, we have a problem," the weapons officer reported, his voice shaking. "All weapons systems are offline. Not damaged, just inactive." "Fix them," Zekthor roared. "We're trying, sir, but they won't respond. It's as if they refuse to function." Down on New Terra, Quindara stood in the main plaza of what had once been the human capital city. Around her, thousands of Enhanced Coalition members watched the sky calmly. They had known this moment would come. Their enhanced minds had calculated the probability that the old Coalition would try to destroy them. "They cannot hurt us anymore," said Dr. Tolvan, who stood beside her. "The defensive systems are working perfectly." The enhanced beings had been busy during the past months. Using their improved intelligence and their ability to work together as a collective mind, they had made incredible scientific breakthroughs. They had discovered how to create fields that disabled aggressive technologies while leaving peaceful ones untouched. Any weapon designed to cause harm simply would not function within a certain distance of their worlds. But tools for building, healing, and learning worked normally. It was the perfect defense against violence. Suddenly, the space around the Coalition fleet filled with new ships. They appeared without warning, as if they had been invisible until that moment. The ships were sleek and beautiful, unlike the blocky military vessels of the Coalition. They moved with grace and purpose. Coalition Fleet. This is Admiral Cho Bin, of the Human Deep Space Command, a voice spoke over all communication channels. We ask that you power down your weapons and prepare to receive diplomatic representatives. Zekthor stared at the viewing screen in shock. Humans? But you ran away. You abandoned your worlds. We did not run away, Marshal. Admiral Cho Bin replied calmly. We simply moved to the next phase of our plan. We invite you to learn what your people have discovered on our former worlds. From one of the human ships, a small transport vessel launched toward Zekthor's flagship. Aboard the transport was Dr. Park Mira, the scientist who had designed Project Genesis. She was accompanied by 2 enhanced Coalition members who had volunteered to help explain what had happened to their people. Zekthor reluctantly allowed the transport to dock. He was curious to meet the humans who had supposedly been defeated. When Dr. Park Mira walked onto his bridge, he was surprised by how small and peaceful she appeared. This tiny woman was supposed to be his enemy? Marshal, Dr. Park Mira said with a polite bow. Thank you for allowing us to speak with you. I believe there has been a misunderstanding about what happened to your people. They have been poisoned, Zekthor declared. You contaminated our soldiers with some kind of mind-control drug. Not poisoned, said one of the enhanced Coalition members who had come with Dr. Park Mira. It was Gextar, the former Vorthak officer, who had once served under General Veltar. Improved. The biological enhancement has made us smarter, healthier, and happier than we ever were before. You are not the same person I knew, Zekthor said, recognizing his old military academy classmate. The real Gextar would never speak of happiness over honor. I am more myself than I have ever been, Gextar replied. The enhancement did not change who I am. It removed the artificial barriers that prevented me from thinking clearly. I can now see that honor and happiness are not enemies. True honor comes from building rather than destroying. Dr. Park Mira activated a small device that projected images in the air between them. The images showed the transformed worlds below, where enhanced beings from many different species worked together on incredible projects. We developed fusion, power that produces no waste, she explained. We have created medicines that can heal diseases that were once fatal. We are building ships that can travel between stars in days instead of months. All of this was accomplished through cooperation and enhanced intelligence. You are trying to control the galaxy, Zekthor accused. No, Dr. Park Mira said softly. We are trying to improve it. The enhancement is not permanent, and it is not forced. Any being who wishes to return to their original state can do so. But very few choose to go back once they experience what they can become. She gestured to another image showing the transformed Coalition members. They looked healthy and content, working on projects that would benefit everyone. There were no weapons, no military formations, no signs of the constant conflict that had defined Coalition society for centuries. Your people are not prisoners, Dr. Park Mira continued. They are pioneers. They are showing the galaxy what civilization can become when intelligence is enhanced and aggression is reduced. On his own ship, Captain Namjoon watched the diplomatic meeting through his monitoring equipment. This was the moment that humanity had been planning for years. Not conquest through force, but transformation through choice. The humans had known that some species would resist the enhancement at first. That was why they had retreated and let the Coalition discover the benefits for themselves. Now they were offering the same choice to the rest of the galaxy. All Coalition ships. This is Admiral Cho Bin, the human commander's voice filled the communication channels again. We invite any of you who wish to see what your people have accomplished to transport down to the surface. No one will be forced to stay, and no one will be enhanced without their consent. Zekthor found himself facing an impossible decision. He could order his fleet to withdraw and report that the mission had failed. But his weapons would not work anyway, so attacking was not an option. Or he could accept the human invitation and see for himself what had happened to his people. "If I go down there," he asked Dr. Park Mira, "will you force this enhancement on me?" "Never," she replied. "The enhancement only works on those who choose to accept it. Fighting it mentally makes it impossible. You could spend years on our worlds and remain unchanged if that is what you truly want." Dr. Tolvan, who had been watching the conversation, stepped forward. "Marshal, I have lived with the enhancement for months now. I can tell you that it is not control or manipulation. It is freedom. Freedom from the constant fear and anger that drove us to endless wars." Zekthor looked around his bridge at his officers. They seemed uncertain, torn between their loyalty to the old coalition and their curiosity about what their transformed comrades had become. "I will go," Zekthor decided, "but only to see for myself what you have done to our people. I will not be converted to your cause." "That is all we ask," Dr. Park Mira said with a gentle smile. "Come and see. Judge for yourself whether what we offer is better than what you have now." As the transport prepared to take Zekthor down to New Terra, human ships throughout the galaxy began to reveal themselves. They had been watching and waiting for this moment. The time had come to offer every species in the galaxy the same choice that the Coalition had stumbled into by accident. The choice between war and wisdom, between conquest and cooperation, between the old galaxy of endless conflict and a new galaxy where intelligence could flourish. The humans had not conquered their enemies. They had given them the chance to conquer themselves. 3 years had passed since the humans first left their worlds. The galaxy was a very different place now. Commander Li Huan walked through the peaceful streets of New Terra, but he was no longer just a military officer. Now he served as an ambassador between the old galaxy and the new one that was being born. The transformation had spread far beyond the original human colonies. Word of the enhancement had traveled to hundreds of worlds, and many species had asked to receive the same biological improvements that had changed the coalition members. The choice was always theirs to make. "Ambassador Li Huan," called a familiar voice. He turned to see Veltar approaching, but this was not the same aggressive general who had once threatened to destroy humanity. The enhancement had changed him completely. Where once there had been anger and hunger for conquest, now there was wisdom and curiosity. "Hello, my friend," Li Huan replied warmly. It still felt strange to call his former enemy a friend, but that was exactly what Veltar had become. "How are the philosophy discussions going?" "Wonderfully," Veltar said with enthusiasm. "Today we are exploring the relationship between consciousness and compassion. Dr. Tolvan has some fascinating theories about how intelligence and empathy evolve together in most species." Li Huan smiled. Veltar now spent his days leading discussions about peace and understanding instead of planning military campaigns. The change was remarkable, but it had been completely voluntary. Veltar had chosen to accept the enhancement after seeing how it had improved the lives of his soldiers. They walked together toward the research center where Dr. Park Mira worked with enhanced beings from dozens of different species. The center was a marvel of cooperation, where former enemies now worked side by side on projects that would benefit the entire galaxy. "Dr. Park Mira," Li Huan called as they entered the main laboratory. "How is the new project progressing?" Dr. Park Mira looked up from a complex machine that hummed with energy. Around her, scientists from many different species worked together on what they called the Great Project. They were attempting to create a communication network that would allow instant contact between any 2 points in the galaxy. We are very close to success, she said excitedly. The enhanced minds working together can solve problems that no single species could handle alone. We should have galactic communication within months. Young Ko Yoon, who had grown up during the transformation years, ran over to join them. She was part of the new generation that had never known a galaxy divided by constant war. To her, cooperation between species was natural and normal. Ambassador Li Huan, she said happily. You hear? The Zephyrian Empire has agreed to try the enhancement program. They want to see if it can help them solve their population crisis. Li Huan nodded with satisfaction. The Zephyrians had been one of the most warlike species in the galaxy, but their constant fighting had led to serious problems on their home worlds. Now they were willing to consider a different path. That brings us to over 40 species participating in the program, he said, and not a single one has asked to return to their original state. Why would they? Ko Un asked innocently. Who would choose to be less intelligent and more angry when they could be smarter and happier? It was a good question. The enhancement did not force anyone to change their personality or beliefs. It simply removed the biological drives toward aggression and fear that had caused so much suffering throughout galactic history. Enhanced beings were still themselves, just better versions of themselves. Captain Nam Jun arrived at the research center with news from the Outer Rim worlds. He had been exploring the galaxy, helping to spread word about the enhancement program to species that had not yet heard about it. The Corvani Republic has agreed to a trial program, he reported. They want to enhance a small group of volunteers, first to see the results. And the Stellar Federation is considering a galaxy-wide vote on whether to adopt the enhancement for all their member worlds. Excellent news, Li Huan said. Are there any species still refusing to participate? A few, Nam Jun admitted. The hegemony of worlds still believes that aggression and competition are necessary for progress. They think the enhancement will make their people weak and dependent. Dr. Park Mira shook her head sadly. They do not understand that cooperation is actually more efficient than competition. Enhanced minds working together can accomplish far more than individual minds fighting against each other. She gestured to the research center around them. Look at what we have achieved in just 3 years. We have developed faster space travel, unlimited clean energy, cures for diseases that plagued species for thousands of years, and we are close to solving the problem of interstellar communication. And we did it all without a single war, added Veltar. No one was conquered or forced to surrender their resources. Everyone contributed freely because they understood that helping others ultimately helps themselves. In another part of the galaxy, Grand Marshal Zekthor sat in his office on the Coalition homeworld. He had spent weeks on New Terra, observing the enhanced beings and learning about their way of life. When he returned home, he had shocked everyone by recommending that the Coalition adopt the enhancement program for all their worlds. The humans did not defeat us, he had told the Coalition Council. They offered us the chance to defeat ourselves, to defeat the anger, fear, and greed that have held us back for so long. The Council had voted to begin voluntary enhancement programs on all Coalition worlds. Zekthor himself had been one of the first to accept the biological improvements. Now he worked to transform the Coalition from a military empire into a cooperative federation focused on exploration and scientific advancement. Back on New Terra, the evening sky was filled with ships from dozens of different species. The former human colonies had become centers of learning and cooperation where beings from across the galaxy came to study and work together. Li Huan stood on the balcony of the research center, looking up at the stars. Dr. Park Mira joined him, carrying 2 cups of tea made from plants that now grew on hundreds of different worlds. Do you think we made the right choice? Li Huan asked. Some people say we should have fought instead of running away. We did fight, Dr. Park Mira replied, quietly. We fought against ignorance with knowledge, against hatred with understanding, and against war with wisdom. Those are the only battles worth winning." Ko-Yun bounded up to join them, her young face bright with excitement about the future. "Dr. Park Mira, when I grow up, I want to help spread the enhancement to new species. Is that possible?" "Of course," Dr. Park Mira said with a warm smile. "By the time you are old enough, we may have contacted species in other galaxies. The work of building a better universe will never be finished." Li Huan thought about the early days when humanity had seemed to be facing extinction. They had been outnumbered and outgunned by the coalition. A traditional war would have meant the end of human civilization. Instead, humanity had chosen to transform their enemies into friends, their conquerors into collaborators. They had not won by destroying others, but by helping others become better than they had ever imagined possible. The galaxy still had problems. There were still species that preferred war to peace, competition to cooperation. But they were becoming fewer each year as more beings chose enhancement and discovered the joy of working together toward common goals. The humans departed without a fight, Li Huan said to himself, remembering the title that historians would someday give to this era. But the galaxy learned that the war was over before it began. The real victory had not been in battle, but in the simple recognition that intelligence and compassion were more powerful than any weapon ever created. Humanity had saved themselves by saving everyone else, and in doing so, they had begun the transformation of the entire universe.